Before the video starts, I want to say, so sorry. My mic actually malfunctioned for the entirety of the first half of this video, but it took me 10 hours to film, so please watch it anyway. The mic quality does get better at around the halfway mark. I am so sorry. I will get it sorted for part 2. BookTok, Bookstagram, BookTube. In recent years, these spaces have grown exponentially. You have the BookTok hashtag on Instagram having over 5 million posts. And I can't even tell you how many there are on TikTok. So clearly, unlike me, some of you kept reading after school. Good for you, you know, because I'm not even sure I can still read. So I decided that I would let the intellectuals amongst us decide what I've read for a month. And that's what this video is. Now, as someone who does not read, who has never ventured onto BookTok, who has never slipped and slid down the booktube, I went into this absolutely blind, which meant that I placed a lot of faith in the TikTok algorithm to put me on the right track. I'm gonna show you the books that I read for this video, and you tell me which track you think the TikTok algorithm put me on. I read these ones. However, because I ended up reading 4 separate series of books for this video, I have decided to split it into 2 parts. So this is part 1, welcome in. And in this video, we're just going to be covering the Twisted series by Ana Huang, which has probably become one of the most infamous series on BookTok. And in part 2, I'm going to be covering the Heavenly Bodies series, the Epinephrine series, which is Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, and also the Akatar series, which is by Sarah J. Maas, and is probably one of the most popular book series on BookTok, at least within this genre. And also, just for some added fun, I am going to be method dressing for each of these book series. I am currently wearing my contemporary romance outfit. This is giving 2024, it's giving fun. Another reason for you to tune into part 2, because you should see the outfit that I wear for Akatar. Now, something I want to say before I get too deep into this video itself is that BookTok is an incredibly diverse place. This means that there is a community who enjoys every single genre of book. You have very dedicated horror book reviewers, you have romance genre reviewers, and you also have people who are into the classics like Jane Austen, the Brontes, or philosophers like Marcus Aurelius or Michel Foucault. All of these spaces are valid, and there are spaces on BookTok for every kind of discussion regarding every different kind of genre. There's a bit of beef happening right now in the BookTok community based on, well, essentially these books. The main issue is that the algorithm, particularly at the moment, is very much pushing people towards books that contain what BookTok is calling spice. Now, if you're like me and you recently saw Dune and you were a bit confused because you thought that was the magic dust that made Zendaya's eyes blue, it's not. Oh, okay. Oh God. Okay, well, they were too heavy anyway. Now, spice is essentially smut. It is very graphic, and often poorly written in some of these books, but sometimes very well written. So, okay, girly. Now, the issue is that these kind of books are becoming known as kind of like the cover of BookTok. A lot of people don't really like that. I will discuss this in a little bit more detail once I've gone through the plots of some of these books, so you have a little bit more contextual knowledge of why they might be causing controversy. But I do just want to say, not every book has to be a good, powerful, meaningful, philosophical book. Not every book has to be great. Sometimes a book is good because it's bad. Sometimes a book just has to be entertaining. It's like TV, right? There are amazing, powerful, moving documentaries, and you feel like you come away from that learning something, that you've grown as a person, that you've experienced something. There's also Love Island and The Bachelor and other forms of reality TV. Are these shows good? I mean, it's subjective, right? However, what we can agree on is whether or not they are good or bad, they are entertaining. Because whether you love it and it's entertaining because you get enjoyment out of it, or you hate it and it's entertaining because you get to moan about it, you got enjoyment from that piece of art. I think calling Love Island art might be a bit of a stretch. You know what I mean. Sometimes it can just be good old-fashioned trash, okay? And I'm here for that. And if you're sat here rather enjoying all this spicy book talk, may I introduce you to the sponsor of this part of today's video, CHEEX. CHEEX is a sexual wellness platform that offers educational and erotic content in audio, visual, and workshop format so that you can get your spicy needs in places other than these books, because I'll be honest, it's a whole new world out there, darling. And that's why CHEEX is pretty special, because they cater to all genders and have a genuine belief that sexuality should be displayed as it exists in the real world. It should be diverse, pleasurable, and most importantly, it should be consensual. And my favorite part, which would you believe is not any of the things I already mentioned, my favorite part is the fact that CHEEX have a huge emphasis on making sure the content that they create is created ethically. They work with adult performers to ensure that they are fairly compensated and considered, including pre-established agreements for exactly what content is to be created, making sure that no one gets exploited or surprised on the day. There's no reproduction of harmful stereotypes or discrimination within the content they produce, and there's diversity in the acts that are shown, creating meaningful and authentic representation. Not to mention, all of their performers are regularly tested, keeping everybody nice and safe. You can explore CHEEX's Pleasure Academy to learn more about your sexuality through some fun workshops and good old-fashioned sex ed. You can browse through their audio library of spicy audio stories. Or if you're more into the visual side of things, you can just go for a good old classic spicy film. You can try CHEEX for free for 7 days as a new customer with an annual subscription using code Ellbat at this link on the screen right now, or you can just scroll into the description, top of the description box, honey. Click it. Not only by clicking on this link will you be supporting my channel, you'll also be getting yourself a really great evening. A wonderful evening ahead of you if you just click that link. Godspeed. Alright, now back to the books. A little content warning before we get further into the video. There is discussion of smut in this video. There's actually a shockingly large amount of discussion of that. There's also discussions of, you know, murder, suicide, there's violence. There's a lot going on here, okay? So just be aware. This is the first series that popped up on my TikTok, and the TikTok that started this whole thing off, the whole reason for this video. And then I fell down a rabbit hole, so now you have this video. An entire plot recap and review of the Twisted series by Ana Huang from memory. Now you may be wondering, who is this Ana Huang? And straight off Ana's website, unhinged.com, which is very aptly named, Ana writes new adult and contemporary romance with deliciously alpha heroes, strong heroines, which by the way, I needed some of to get through some of these books, and plenty of steam, angst, and swoon. The Twisted series started out as self-published books, which explains why there are quite a few typos in this. There are. I believe these books eventually got picked up by a publishing house, and thank God, because these were the original covers of these books. You can't read that on the bus. Be so for real, you're gonna whip that out on the bus. Imagine you invite your mum over for coffee and that's just staring at her from the bookcase. Book 1, Twisted Love. He has a heart of ice, but for her, he'd burn the world. I have some thoughts about that. This is a contemporary romance book, which means it's set in the modern day, in the real world. If this was a fantasy book, I would understand the whole he'd burn the world thing, because maybe he's a firebender. You know, I've seen Avatar, The Last Airbender, not the one where they're blue. Maybe he can wield fire, maybe he's a villain, maybe he would actually burn the world. But obviously this is set in the real world, so he's gonna commit actual war crimes? This book has a whopping 857,000 ratings on Goodreads with 80,000 reviews. All of those combined, it has a Goodreads score of 3.73, which we're gonna get into it and you'll see whether or not it deserves that. First thing to say is that all of the books actually come with a playlist at the start, which I love that from Ana. Most notable track on this playlist, What Doesn't Kill You by Kelly Clarkson. Incredible choice, number 1. We love you, Kelly. Secondly, that particular song choice becomes incredibly funny when you find out the plot of this book. So remember that for later, it will be important. Now I'm going to introduce you all to the Twisted board. This is going to get insane, but for now, all you need to know is that there are 4 books in the Twisted series, and each book centers around one girl in a friendship group of 4 girls. See, 4 girls, 4 books, it's wonderful. First book, we've got Ava Chen. Second book, we've got Bridget von Ashberg. Third book, we've got Jules Ambrose. And fourth book, we've got Stella Alonso. As you can see, each woman has a man opposite. It's horrifying, where are the gays? I know. The red string indicates a connection between 2 characters, okay? It gets weirdly incestual Thankfully not between the two that are actually related. For now, the only people that are connected are the people that we understand who know each other from the very first page of book 1. So we're going to quite literally go through the whole thing. Book 1, Twisted Love, follows our girl Ava Chen and her love interest, Alex Volkov. Now for some reason, I don't know what it is, it's like most of the girlies who write romantasy books or romance books in general came together and they were like, okay, so how do we create a bad boy? How do we let the audience know that this is a bad guy? And they all collectively decided that they needed to make use of the uncommonly used consonants X, V, and K. Because obviously, guys, how are you supposed to know that he's an edgy bad boy but also the main love interest if his name doesn't have an X or a V in? Or a K? Duh. This book is written in dual POV. It's mainly from Ava's POV, but every now and then we get a little bit of Alex's POV, which I love personally. I mean, it's like the only time I'd like to be inside a man's brain. Now, each of these books kind of explores a different trope. Now, a trope in particularly the romance genre is kind of like a template of how a relationship will work or how a theme will work in the book. In book 1, we have the grumpy sunshine trope. Now, this is a trope whereby one character is super lovely, nice, optimistic and friendly, and the other character is borderline a war criminal. But for her, he's a soft boy. Now, whilst you can get reverse grumpy sunshine, which is where the male is the nice, optimistic one and the girl is trying to murder people on the daily, not in this case. And we know this because Ava's nickname in the book is quite literally Sunshine, off of Grumpy Sunshine trope, and Alex's name is Alex Volkov. So naturally, bad boy. She's a Pisces, which we know because Ana Huang very helpfully put each of these characters' star signs on her website. If you're an astrology girly, please tell me what that means. She's 22, she's in college, she loves to bake. She's a photographer? Allegedly. And I say allegedly because this comes up at the start and then pretty much never comes up again. So pretty sure she's like those people on Instagram who put entrepreneur in their bio and she's just unemployed. Final thing to note about Ava, she is traumatized. She's got that kind of trauma that means she has nightmares and no memories because she's got like that block in her brain, so she can't access that. She's got no idea what's going on. But we learn later on that something called the incident happened. And whilst we have no real mention of what that is because, you know, no memories, we do find out that her mother is dead. Her mother, by the way, who does not get a name throughout the entirety of this book. Okay, I'm gonna use a black pen. I'm gonna put in dead. Now we get introduced to Ava on page 1 of the book. She is stranded in the rain at a bus stop and she can't get an Uber. Remember that she's in the rain because this becomes important later on. So she calls her brother for a lift. Everyone please welcome in Josh Chen. Now this is Josh Chen, Ava's brother. You can see because they are linked by a nice little line that goes between them, their dad, and their mother. This interaction here on, I think, page 2 of the book gives us our first, I'm sorry, what? moment of the book. So Ava calls brother Josh, and Josh answers the phone midway through having sex, sir. Everyone, by the way, is just cool with this. He's fine with talking to his sister whilst being inside another woman. The woman is fine with him talking to his sister whilst he's inside of her. And she's like, oh, you having sex? Ugh, classic Josh. If one of my siblings answered the phone whilst inside another human being, on site, I am getting a divorce from my family. So obviously Josh can't come. I mean, well, I mean, maybe we should just ask Ava. She can stay on the phone and find out. He can't come get her at the bus stop. So Josh decides to send his best friend in the whole wide world, Alex Volkov. Yes, this is older brother's best friend trope. Hello, welcome in, good spot. Now, Alex Volkov pulls up in his Aston Martin. He's a Scorpio. Take from that what you will. I believe the first thing that he says to Ava in this entire book is, get in, no hello, where are his manners? So our description of Alex comes from Ava's point of view, and it goes, I am gonna do an American accent for these readings, so apologies to any Americans who get offended. The person driving said Aston Martin was the last person I wanted or expected to pick me up. He wasn't an I'll do my buddy a favor and rescue his stranded little sister kind of guy. He was a look at at me wrong and I'll destroy you and everyone you care about kind of guy. And he'd do it looking so calm and gorgeous that you wouldn't notice your whole world burning around you until you were already a heap of ashes at his Tom Ford-clad feet. Much to unpack. Starting with, we get told shortly after this that Alex has spent every holiday with Ava and Josh for the last 8 years. So you are telling me that this man is not willing to help out a woman he has spent every Christmas with for the last 8 years. And the dialogue between these two in the car is so bad that we really do get the impression that they just don't talk. In fact, they're not even civil to each other, but we don't get any context as to why that is. So I am confused. What do you talk about around the Christmas dinner table? Now, there's a lot of Alex lore that we get very quickly in this chapter, so bear with me. I'm gonna read you some tea on this. Personally, I thought Alex was an asshole. I was sure he had his reasons, some kind of psychological trauma that shaped him into an unfeeling robot. Now, the reason he's an unfeeling robot, we find out, is because both of his parents are dead. So that's Daddy Volkov and Mummy Volkov are no more. I call this the Batman blueprint, by the way, which is the easiest way to make a male character who is a bad person redeemable, is to give them trauma caused by losing both their parents. And much like our boy Bruce, his parents left him a boatload of money when they died. This is important because we then find out that this man quadrupled his inheritance before he left high school. And the explanation for how he achieved this is incredible. He'd invented a new financial modeling software in high school that made him a multi-millionaire before he could vote. That's it. That's all you get on that. Big fan of financial modeling software. With an IQ of 160, Alex Volkov was a genius, or close to it. He was the only person in Feya's history to complete its 5-year joint undergrad MBA program in 3 years. And at age 26, he was the COO of one of the most successful real estate development companies in the country. He was a legend, and he knew it. I do have some questions about how he went from financial modeling software to real estate development. I don't feel like those are that closely linked, personally, but I guess I don't have an IQ of 160. How does she even know his IQ is 160? Does he just go around telling people that that's his IQ? I feel like he does, and that's given me the ick. So now we know our two main characters. I do want to point out that the title Twisted Love is a very accurate title because this book is actually unhinged. It is so twisted that I actually reject its classification as a contemporary romance novel, and I personally would like to put it in dark romance because in fantasy books, I feel like you can get away with more toxic behaviours, okay? The red flags look slightly more purple, okay? When you set your book in the real world and you let your main love interest do, well, we're gonna get into it, but he does a lot of things here that are criminal offences. I just don't feel like I can as easily get on board with it. I stand by the fact that this man would not get away with 99% of what he does in this book if it weren't for the fact that he is hot. So to give you a rundown of the plot, Josh Chen is going away. He's a doctor in training. He's going to do some Doctors Without Borders stuff. So he's going away for a year. He asks his BFF, Alex Volkov, to look after his sister, Ava Chen, who, by the way, is a 22-year-old woman. So instead of doing what a normal person would do, which is if my mate told me, hey, I'm going away to Guatemala for a year, can you keep an eye on my little sibling? I'd be like, yeah, sure, babe, no worries. I'll send a text. I'll make a pass the bake every now and then. Alex, however, takes this to mean he has to literally stalk her? Criminal. There is literally a point in this book where she doesn't reply to her phone for like 4 hours and he comes and finds her and shouts at her for not answering her phone. This is a 22-year-old college student and alleged photographer. What is it that you think she's gonna be doing that means that if she doesn't answer her phone for 4 hours, she must be dead? I think this obsession with her started in chapter 1, where, remember when she was in the rain? It's worth noting that she was wearing a white t-shirt. Alex basically sees her in her wet white t-shirt, and it's revealed that she's wearing a bright red bra underneath, which she is mortified about, right? But in my head, the red bra must not have been visible before. Like, where is she shopping that a white t-shirt would not show at all that she had a red bra underneath it? Have I just been going to the wrong shops? Every white t-shirt I own is kind of displaying a red bra underneath it, I'm gonna be honest. So she has some really strong fibres in those clothes to be concealing that in the first place. Anyway, he sees her in a little wet white top and he's like, wow, I guess I'm in love now. I'm kidding, it doesn't happen quite that fast, but I'm pretty sure that's the reason why he stalks her. After all, he is a real estate developer and she, in his eyes, has great assets. So they obviously start getting it on, right? And it starts off a little slow at first, a little bit cheeky, a little bit tee-hee-ha-ha, like, I was giggling at some points during this book. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like I said, I think the last book I properly read was like Tess of the D'Urbervilles in high school. Imagine my surprise when I found out that we could put this kind of content in books. This book, which by the way reads like it is written for 12-year-olds, it is a very easy read, okay? I was so surprised when I turned the page and suddenly they are just going at it. Blushing. I was blushing. Don't get me wrong, I knew that we could do that because 50 Shades of Grey was a thing, but I thought like 50 Shades of Grey was the only book that did that. I thought that was why it was so popular. I thought that's why like the Pope banned it, because I thought the Pope was like, we are not putting this in books. And I thought like maybe 50 Shades of Grey had like an exclusivity on putting spice in books. Turns out not true. And there is so much in this. And it is well written, I'll be honest. I was sat there like, yeah, I can see that. I imagine that. I get it. So they fall in love, naturally. He saves her from drowning in a pool because some mean girl pushes her in because the mean girl's in love with Alex and Alex doesn't want her. Random, but she has a phobia of water. Remember that from chapter 1? Anyway, your enemies are my enemies and your friends are my friends. And if you wanted, I would burn down the world for you. I'd do anything for you, no matter how twisted or impossible. We love a callback to the title of the book. You are the light to my dark sunshine. Without you, I'm lost. She felt like heaven to my hell, the closest I'd ever get to salvation, and yet I still wanted to drag her into the depths of Hades with me. I personally was of the opinion that Hades was a person, not a place. Which makes that quote a lot more interesting if you look at it from that perspective. But considering those quotes, you would think like, oh wow, it's like enemies to lovers, sunshine grumpy, all of that stuff, like it's done. I was wrong. The last 100 pages of this book are filled with the most unhinged plot twists of all time. Okay? I'm now gonna speed run for you what happens in the rest of this book, because most of this book, solid 90% of this book, is just them getting it on. Great, we love that. We knew it was trashy good stuff. Last 100 pages, unhinged. Essentially, we find out that the incident with Ava Chen, the thing that traumatizes her, the thing that gives her the nightmares, is that she was almost drowned to death by her own mother. The dead one that's unnamed? Yes. But what we find out is the reason she's dead is because she was caught trying to drown Ava, and she then was sent to a psychiatric facility where she suicided into the afterlife. Crazy that this woman does not even have a name after trying to murder her own kid. But that's not all. Ava suddenly gets her memories back from the incident and realizes that it wasn't her unnamed dead mother that tried to kill her after all. It was her father, Michael Chen. Now, Michael Chen is described as like aloof and not really that interested in Ava throughout the whole book, and she's always like, why doesn't my dad love me? Spoiler, he doesn't love you because he's tried to drown you and you're still alive. This man wanted to be down one kid and ended up down one wife. So obviously, how does the mother end up in the psychiatric facility if he's the one that did it? Well, because Ava has no memories, he blames it on the mother. Successfully, because misogyny. So she ends up in the psychiatric facility and unalives herself. I also realised whilst editing this that I completely forgot to say why Michael Chen wants to unalive his own daughter. Essentially, unnamed mother had an affair and Ava is the product of that affair. Ava is not really Michael Chen's daughter, and so he resents her because she is a living reminder of his wife's unfaithfulness. It's also worth noting that he does try and murder Ava twice in this book. How a grown man fails to unalive a literal child twice, I do not know. I mean, clearly murder is not his forte. And just when you're thinking, well, that's a crazy plot twist, that's not it. Luckily for Ava, Alex knows people at the FBI. So they organise a sting operation where Michael Chen admits that he tried to murder his own daughter and then framed his wife. And he goes to jail? A good thing that he knows the FBI. All of the FBI. Good thing he knows all of them and that they're willing to do a sting operation for that. And you might be thinking, that must be the end of the book. Like, what an incredible plot twist. But there's more. Remember how Mummy and Daddy Volkov died, leaving their poor son Alex Volkov alone in the world? Well, it turns out they were murdered. These two were murdered in a home invasion that Alex was witness to. Except Alex realizes that it wasn't really a home invasion, it was a hit. Why? Because his parents were in the mafia. But there's more. So freshly traumatized 12-year-old Alex goes to his Uncle Volkov, new character reveal, keep up, and goes, hey, Uncle Volkov, I don't think my parents died in a home invasion. I think it was a hit because we're part of an Eastern European mafia. And Uncle Volkov goes, yeah, babe, I think you're right, and I know who did it. Gasps all round, gasps all round. I need to get my string out here because things are about to get insane. Are you keeping up? Uncle Volkov turns around and says the person who killed your parents was their business rival. And who was their business rival? None other than Michael Chen. Gonna put this on the board here just so we're all aware. There we go. So, processing that information, in order for Michael Chen to be business rivals with Mummy and Daddy Volkov, who are part of some Eastern European mafia, he would have to be part of some American mafia. Right? Are you keeping up with this? Okay? Lots of things going on here. 12-year-old Alex Volkov is like, right, well, absolutely not. I am a genius, my IQ's 160, don't you know? I am going to avenge my dead parents. I told you it's giving Batman Blueprint. So Alex Volkov decides that he's going to ruin Michael Chen's life from the inside out. So this man flies from Eastern Europe to America to find Michael Chen. And what does he find when he gets there? Josh Chen. I need to connect Michael Chen to Alex Volkov. Right, I've put it on the board, are we all keeping up? Right. So Alex decides that he can befriend Josh Chen, get close to the family so that he can uncover and then expose and destroy Michael Chen the way that Michael Chen destroyed his life. So this means that Alex was never best friends with Josh, technically. He was just using him to get to his father. And you might be thinking, that is crazy. You know, what a plot twist. But what if I told you there's more? Because we then find out that Michael Chen was too busy trying to murder his own child to orphan someone else's. And so Alex is like, so who actually did kill my parents? And do you know who it was? Uncle Volkov. We find out that because Mummy and Daddy Volkov were the heads of the family business, they had all the money and all the power, and Uncle Volkov wanted what they had, so he hatched a plan to murder the entire family. That way, he can get all of the money and be head of the family business, aka the mafia. Unfortunately for him, Alex lives, which means he gets all the inheritance money and head of the family business, leaving Uncle Volkov with nothing. Just less family members, I guess, which, I mean, less Christmas presents, so I guess it's money saving. Uncle Volkov has tried to keep Alex sweet over the years, tried to be his only friend, only family member and confidant, because he has all the money. But now Alex has started to realize that all is not what it seems with Uncle Volkov. Because when 12-year-old Alex goes to his uncle and says, I think it was a hit on my parents, this man obviously can't say, yeah, it was me, so he just lies. Right? He's scrambling. He's like, I need to find someone who will want to bunk off two members of the Eastern European Mafia. And so I imagine he got on Google and was just like, business owners in the US, finds Michael Chen. So he's not a mafia member at all. He's just an American business owner that this man found on Google, I think. Okay, editing Ellbat here to give you a little fact check on what I just said. Michael Chen was actually business partners with the Volkovs, and that's how they knew each other, but I am still unsure as to what that business was and why he would murder his own business partner when the business was so successful. But either way, I feel like it wasn't very 160 IQ of Alex to believe that Michael Chen would murder his own business partner, but there we are. And Alex has based his entire life off destroying this man's life, purely on the basis that he murdered his parents, which he just didn't. So obviously Alex finding out that he's wasted his whole life on a revenge plot against the wrong person, very angry. So he says he's gonna kill Uncle Volkov, basically, it's implied. Uncle Volkov, knowing that this man has an IQ of 160, so is an absolute weapon, is like, right, well, I need an insurance policy. How do I stop this crazy young man from murdering me? Oh, I know. Alex, because he's been close to his uncle, has been talking about how he's fallen in love with Ava Chen. You see where this is going? So Uncle Volkov, as an insurance policy, kidnaps Ava Chen and her friend Bridget von Ashburg, who, by the way, did I mention, is the princess of a made-up European country. I'll link these bad boys together. You may be thinking that's insane, and you are correct, but there is more. So Alex Volkov, realizing that his uncle is actually the bad guy, and he has kidnapped the love of his life, Ava Chen, and Princess Bridget von Ashburg, he gets in contact with Reese Larson, Bridget von Ashburg's bodyguard, who, by the way, given that she's currently kidnapped, is clearly not very good at his job. But that's a discussion for book 2. So Alex and Reese are now connected. So these two get together and they decide the best way to save the girls is to storm the mansion that Uncle Volkov is holding the girls in. No police involved, by the way. Incredible. So they storm in, they manage to save the girly pops, right? And Alex then commits several crimes, including torture and murder, of which, by the way, there is no consequences for. None at all. He does just murder his uncle and a couple of other men, and there are no consequences for that. I'm assuming it's because maybe she's a princess, and it's like a diplomatic immunity thing. Anyway, award-winning photographer Ava Chen and Princess Bridget von Ashburg survive thanks to the work of Alex Volkov and Reese Larson. But Alex decides that his life is clearly too dangerous for Sunshine Girl Ava Chen. Now this is despite the fact that the person responsible for all the danger in Alex's life, Uncle Volkov, is now dead. So I'm not really sure what danger he's referring to here. I guess I just don't understand the the life of a real estate developer. He lies to Ava and says he never loved her in an attempt to push her away so that she can go live a normal, happy life because his life is too bad boy dangerous. Do you not see how many X's and V's are in his name? Hi, it is Editing Ellbat here once again, just to fact check everything I just said. Alex actually poisons his uncle with tea, but because the poison takes a while to work and the uncle is very close to unaliving famous photographer Ava Chen, he has to buy time, so he confesses everything about his revenge plot on Michael. Once the uncle is dead, Ava waits for Alex to kind of explain everything and tell her that it was a lie just to waste time, but Alex says he was telling the truth, despite the fact that he does actually love her, by the way, and leaves our girl heartbroken. So obviously Ava decides, after all of this, after the arrest by the FBI of her father, after being kidnapped by a member of the Eastern European Mafia, after finding out that the love of her life actually was implanted into her life artificially to pretend to be their friend so that he could destroy their entire family from the inside out. Remember the playlist from the beginning of the video? What doesn't kill you? Yeah? She didn't die, but she did move to London. So naturally Alex does what any well-adjusted individual would do when their former girlfriend leaves them and literally moves countries to escape them. He quits his job and then moves to London, where he proceeds to stalk her for 4 months. And I'm not talking like subtle stalking, like in the shadows. I'm talking he literally follows her around saying nothing all day. He waits for her outside her classes. He stands outside her house. And eventually, after 4 months of this behaviour, which I think she's just got Stockholm syndrome at this point, she's like, oh, I actually need to build a table and it's quite hard to do on my own, so do you want to come upstairs and help me? And then they start rekindling their relationship. Ah! Now, at the very end of the book, we get a call back to Ava being a photographer, and she has an art exhibit of her photos. During this exhibit, a night that's supposed to be about her and her work, Alex gets on stage in front of everyone and performs a love ballad? I have the ick. Now I know some pretty unbelievable things happened in this book, okay? But I fully believe that the most unrealistic part of this plot is the fact that this grown man stood up on stage in an exhibition hall full of British people and started singing a love song and no one laughed. But then I was talking to someone about this book and they were like, well, do you know what song he sings? And I don't think it's explicitly mentioned, right? But that's where I refer to our dear friend The Playlist at the beginning of the book. And the last song on this playlist is You Sang to Me by Mark Anthony. Now, I went on Spotify to find this song, and when I tell you that if this is the song this man sings, now I recommend that you go and listen to this song, because I'm not sure I can play it, purely because I'm not trying to get this video copyright striked. Have you seen how long this video is? Please turn off your ad blocker. I'm gonna read you some of the lyrics. Girl, I live for how you make me feel, so I question all this being real, 'cause I'm not afraid to love. For the first time, I'm not afraid to love. Do you now see how the fact that no one laughed at that is the most unrealistic part of this plot? Anyway, Ava somehow manages to avoid getting the ick, and they proceed to have sex in the exhibit hall. Because did I mention he's rich and paid everyone to leave? I mean, is he gonna pay security to delete the footage that's obviously on the CCTV cameras anyway, or? But that is the end of Twisted Love. So I have some thoughts, as I'm sure you do. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. I really did enjoy this book. Controversial opinion, but I did actually enjoy this book. That's not to say that it was good, because I don't believe it was. But did I finish the entire thing in one day? Why, yes. Yes, I did. I was completely unprepared for how filthy this gets. It is incredibly smutty, and I don't think it's obvious going into it that it's gonna be that smutty, given that it is so easy to read that I thought it was for, like, young adults. And I can see how that can cause some issues and why the book has got a lot of hate, particularly. Saying that, the smut is very well written, okay? If there's one thing my girl Anna can do, it's write some spice, okay? Good for her. And I have to say, something that I do personally love from Anna, more than the playlists, is the fact that her dedication at the front of this book is to her mum. Indeed. To my mum, for all her support and encouragement over the years. Mum, if you're reading this, turn back immediately. There are scenes in here that will scar you for life. And honestly, I agree. I personally would give this book 3 out of 5. I'm not giving it any points for skill of writing beyond the smut scenes, which are written very well. Good job, Anna. I'm giving it most of those points purely based on vibes. This is so unhinged that I had such an enjoyable time. As long as you go into it with an understanding that this is meant to be entertainment, whether you want to laugh with it or at it, it is entertaining. Book 2, Twisted Games. He can't have her, but he's taking her anyway. A little bit more on the nose with the sexual innuendo in that one. So on Goodreads, this book has 574,000 ratings and 51,000 reviews, which obviously is quite a significant drop-off from the first book. Like I said, lots of people kind of gave up after that. I think it was the singing. This book got a Goodreads score of 4.12, which I'm gonna say is quite high, but I'm pretty sure I know the exact reason behind that score. And I'm just gonna say, cruel to me. That is a reference that I will explain later, but I'd like it if my mum clicked off the video before that point. Thank you so much. This is better. I feel like Anna learnt a lot from Twisted Love in terms of what not to do. So we have lost the murder and stalking plot lines that were quite weirdly prevalent, actually, in Twisted Love. But then again, this book is about bloodlines and class wars. So we are going to add to our board as we go through this plot. It's going to be a bit of a speedier run than the first one because it is a bit easier to understand. After all, are we not always constantly in a class war? Anyway, so Twisted Games centres around our princess and fellow abductee, Bridget von Ashburg, and her bodyguard, Reese Larson. Now you will notice that Reese has a little MF in the middle of his name, and that is because most of the TikTok edits that I found of this book tend to call him Reese Larson. Largely for the same reason that I believe this book has a 4-star rating on Goodreads, which is again the crawl to me scene. We don't know much about our girl Bridget going into this book. All we really know is that our girl BVA is a princess of a made-up European nation, and she is an Aquarius. And you don't even find out the Aquarius part in the book, you find it out on Ana Huang's website. There is very little to Bridget's character, I will say, other than her being a princess. It's like that is her thing. Which, to be fair, if I was a princess, I too would make that my thing. Like, why would I have the need for any other kind of personality? But the problem is there's no lore for her being a princess. Like, there's no substance to what that means in terms of like diplomatic relations, or like what her country even does, or what it's famous for, or if it has a good tourism industry, or what their national dish is. There is nothing in this book about build-up for Bridget's character in terms of like her role as a princess. Yet the whole book is based on her being a princess, and that being why she can't sleep with her bodyguard, because he's just a poor man. Reese, we know from book 1, kidnap plot with the Uncle Mafia member guy, clearly not doing a great job in that role, given the fact that she was kidnapped by quite literally the first person that's ever tried it. How he still has a job, I don't know. I'm gonna do this plot almost entirely from memory because I didn't make as many notes on this one as I did book 1, because to be honest, I didn't have it in me. So this book starts a little bit further back in time than when we ended on book 1. They don't start directly after each other. We find out that Bridget's lifelong bodyguard is going on paternity leave because his wife has just had a baby. Side note, it is a little bit of a plot hole, this idea, because I do find it quite unrealistic that a bodyguard who is described as being with her 24/7, living in the same place she lives, does not leave her alone. How does he have a wife and a child? Like, how has that come about? But of course, who is going to replace this old guard? I wonder, could it be super sexy ex-Navy SEAL Reese Larson? Indeed it is. Unfortunately for Reese, he will always be Reese number 2 in the BOOKTOK universe. The girls that get it, and the girls that don't have to wait until I get to the point where I review Akatar later in the video. Reese is described throughout the book as being stoic, broody, and arrogant. And our elite bodyguard has 2 rules for his clients. 1, protect his clients at all costs. And 2, do not become emotionally involved. Ever. So take a bet about what's gonna happen. Tropes that this book covers are obviously bodyguard to love interest, and also age gap, because there is a 10-year age gap between Bridget and her ex-Navy SEAL bodyguard. Unlike in book 1, where the whole book is kind of like chronologically done, and the only real time jump we get is the 4 months that Alex spends stalking Ava, which are very briefly detailed, this book has quite large time jumps. So they start off by being introduced, they don't really get along very well, and there's obviously kidnapping that goes on in that time. How he still has his job is very briefly explained, by the way, as the fact that they kept it a secret because she snuck out and didn't take a phone or something and lied, and she doesn't want there to be an international incident, so she doesn't want to tell, and he doesn't really want to tell because he'd lose his job, which to me just... Okay, sure, kidnapping happens, they're still not really getting along, and then there is a 2-year time jump. And we're just told that in that time, they got close. This is the opposite of a slow burn. This is actually a speed run. Now, with most forbidden love books, you get like secret touches and longing glances. This does not happen in this book. Okay, it turns out I completely forgot this book because I just opened up a page and it turns out there was an active shooter at some point. I don't remember that at all! But I tell you what I do remember. Crawl to me. I'm pretty sure the plot goes something like, our girl Bridge, who's been chilling in America, is summoned back to her made-up nation because I'm pretty sure her crown prince brother has just abdicated as crown prince, and he's like, I want to go marry a poor person or something, and so she's like, okay Slay, I'm now crown princess or something like that. I think that's what happens. For added context here, Bridget's grandfather is currently the one on the throne, and he's getting very old, and the reason why Bridget's brother and now her were crown prince and crown princess is because both of her parents are dead. One died giving birth to her mother, and the other one died in a car accident. Don't know what it is, but Ana Huang loves orphans. Truly. Almost every single parent in the series is dead, and if they are alive, they're usually horrible people. Stella Alonso is the only one that has 2 alive parents, and both of her parents are just not that nice. So there we are. Anyway, shout out Anna, shout out orphans, I guess. And she's told she has to marry a royal from another family, or like date some royal people, because she's got to strengthen her position at royal court. I don't know, it's reading like a less interesting Bridgerton. As we've just discovered, at 80 pages in, there is an active shooter that I don't remember at all, but Rhys gets shot by the looks of things. He's fine. But there we are. She's like playing the game. That's the game in Twisted Games. So she's playing that publicly, but of course privately, her and her bodyguard are getting freaky. So yeah, we get that overprotective bodyguard. There's a scene in here where she goes on a date with a guy, and then she rides off, and then she falls and hits her head, and she's like unconscious in the rain, and then Rhys finds her, and he's like, oh my god, my princess, please let it be her. It was. I sank onto my knees by her side, my chest hollowing at the paleness of Bridget's face and the large purplish bruise on her forehead. For clarity, she rode on a horse and then just rode into a tree. Like, got knocked unconscious. You'd think a princess would know how to ride a horse, okay? That's a rich people thing. A small trickle of blood dripped down the side of her face, turning pink when it mingled with the rain. She was unconscious and completely soaked through. A snarling, protective beast rose in my chest with such ferocity that it stunned me. Vigo was as good as dead. Vigo, a very rich person name, by the way. If he hadn't dragged his feet, if someone had called me and told me Bridget was missing, I forced myself to push the anger aside for now. I had more important things to focus on. I checked her pulse, which was weak but steady. Thank God. Her helmet was askew, and dirt smeared her cheeks and clothes. The beast in my chest snarled again, ready to rip not only Vigo but Nikolai to shreds for not protecting her, at least being there for her. Nikolai, I think, was the guy she went on a date with, and Vigo is like the house organizer. He's the one that like organizes their lives, and he didn't tell her bodyguard that she was missing. Obviously, she has just fallen off her horse. Like, there's not really much this geezer who was on a date could have done, especially because she literally ran away from him. So, like, personally, I would take the L and just leave. Like, I'm not chasing after her, that's embarrassing, and also consent matters, so king of respecting her boundaries, really. But to cover that up, Anna then goes, he probably couldn't have done anything to prevent Bridget from falling off her horse. Judging by her helmet and position on the ground, that must have been what happened. But the beast didn't care. All it knew was she was her, and for that, someone had to pay. Anyway, that's what, like, 90% of this book is. It's Rhys being protective of a princess that he can't have but really wants. So we get that, like, overprotective, possessive, jealous, forbidden love thing, especially because she has to keep going on these dates with all these royals to play the game. But then obviously the big plot twist here is that some cousin of hers ends up trying to blackmail her by filming her having sex with Rhys. Does sound very on brand for the royal family, I'll be honest. There's a guy called Stefan who's a duke that she has to like dance with, and the press love it because they're like, oh, the duke and the princess, ooh. And then Rhys is obviously super jealous because they did all that getting close over 2 years. I don't know. And then we get this scene, which is where Rhys interrupts her dancing with the Duke Stefan at a ball because he's getting jealous that they're dancing a lot because they dance twice. And technically, like, they're each other's date, so that kind of has to happen. So he fakes an emergency and he's like, you gotta come with me. And he takes her into the library of the palace, right? And she's like, bro, what do you mean? He's like, there's no emergency. I have to go back then. He's like, no, you can't. He's getting too close. You dance with him twice. And she's like, but that's my date. I kind of have to dance with him. And Rhys gets all like, don't Don't stop saying date. You can't date him. And I have to read you at least a heavily censored version of this because otherwise you will not understand why this book is rated as highly as it is. Because I tell you now, it is not for the plot. I walked to the table by the window and leaned against it while watching Bridget through dark, hooded eyes. Possessiveness and anger gripped me. Not at her, but at our situation and a world where we were forced to sneak around like criminals. I hated having to hide her. Us. I wanted the world to know she was mine and mine alone. I wanted to tattoo myself into her skin and sink into her so deep she could never get me out. Take off your dress, I said. Reese, take it off. I heard Bridget's breath hitch from across the room, but she didn't argue again. Instead, she reached behind her and did as I asked, keeping her eyes on mine the entire time. Other than our harsh breaths, the metallic... Other than our harsh breaths, the soft, metallic slide of the zipper was the only sound breaking the silence. I remained still, my muscles coiled with tension. I couldn't claim her the way I wanted outside these walls. But right here, right now, when it was just the two of us, I was going to take her until we were both utterly ruined. So essentially that happens, they're in a library, and then chapter 36 is Bridget's POV. Keep your underwear, gloves, and heels on, he said, still in that deceptively soft tone, and crawl to me. My breath gusted out in shock, even as my core spasmed at the order. I'd never crawled for anyone in my life, while I was all but naked no less. Even if I wasn't the future queen, it would be degrading, humiliating, depraved. And I'd never been more turned on. I am blushing. I am indeed. That's probably going to get me demonetized, but I just wanted to give you the vibes. Yeah, this book is not for the plot, as I've said, as we've literally made very few further connections on this. It is pretty much purely for the smut. Here are some other quite incredible Reese Larson lines. Remember, in public, you're my princess, but in private, you're my... Careful, Mr. Larson, or I think you actually like me. Baby, we're way beyond that. Okay, okay. Something to note, by the way, is that each one of these girls gets their own nickname from their love interest. Our girl BVA gets the nickname Princess, which doesn't really feel like a nickname. That feels like a title. And so I think Reese is lacking in the imagination department. But to be honest, he's made up for it with his other multitude of other talents. So lore that we do get in this book, Reese Larson works for a security firm owned by a man named Christian Harper, who will come up again later. Essentially, back to the plot, which we obviously did forget because that is not why anyone is reading this book. Bridget overcomes the blackmail allegations by calling our Lord and Saviour and professional singer Alex Volkov. I'm not exactly sure how the COO of a real estate development company seems to have this much power. But for some reason in this universe, there is nothing this man cannot do, there is no one this man does not know, and there are no consequences for anything, ever. And then Bridget decides that actually she loves Reese so much, she doesn't want to marry a rich man anymore. So she goes through her made-up country's constitution, or law book. I'm not quite sure how the political system there works, but she finds the law that says that a royal is not allowed to marry a povo. She's like, there is a law, it says rich people cannot marry poor people, and I'm gonna overturn it. So she goes on her political campaigning trail. She's in her political era, and she decides to try and convince all the members of parliament, or enough members of parliament, to vote to abolish that law. She eventually manages to get all the geezers together and they abolish the law that says that a royal can't marry a poor person. Woohoo! Which, by the way, is extra funny, because if you remember, the whole reason that she had to move back to the made-up country was because she was now going to be future queen because her older brother abdicated because he wanted to marry a poor person. Which means she quite literally was just like, yeah, could never be me, I would like to be a royal and still marry a poor person. I bet her older brother is seething. Could you imagine their family dinner table after that? You've just given up your birthright so that you could be with the person you love because tradition, honor, family, values, and then your sister comes in and is like, yeah, actually I quite fancy my bodyguard. Let me just abolish the law. Why didn't you guys think of that? Anyhow, you might be thinking that's the end of the book, right? Everyone's happily ever after, and they do a bunch of PR, and people love Rhys Larson. But it would not be a twisted book if there wasn't an out-of-pocket, absolutely wild plot twist in there. It gets dropped in there that Rhys doesn't actually know who his biological father is. Are you seeing where this is going? No, they're not siblings. But turns out of all of the likelihoods of who this man's biological father could be, it turns out his biological father is actually one of the nobles or the dukes of her made-up country. Those of you who are good at maths and have put 2 and 2 together will have worked out that that means that the entire plot of them being forbidden love, of him being a commoner and her being a princess, and them overthrowing the laws and overcoming adversity is actually irrelevant, because it turns out he was never one of the poor people to begin with. Could have just done a 21andMe, babe. Could have been saved the whole book. It's also worth noting that Rhys's long-lost father is the father of the cousin that tries to blackmail Bridget, which has caused some confusion in the fandom, as you can imagine, because now on Ana Huang's website, there are most frequently asked questions from readers to Ana, and one of the most frequently asked questions of the entire series is, are Rhys and Bridget related? To which Ana just writes, no. His dad is the cousin's dad, but they're cousins by marriage or something similar. So whilst they're not blood related, which I imagine is a completely different trope, they would show up on the same family tree. Technically, not related, but it's close enough. That is Twisted Games. Congrats, you made it through book 2. In terms of a review for this book, I'll be honest, I feel like this was less fun than book 1, for obvious reasons, but I do think the writing is a little bit better in this book. It toned down the absurdity of some of the plots, which, you know, I think makes it fit a little bit better into the contemporary climate that it's supposed to be based in. However, I do feel like the writing still, it lacks some stuff in terms of the world building is a bit lackluster, but to be honest with you, nobody is reading this for the plot. The smut is very well written, but we know Anna's been doing that, okay? Most of the songs in this playlist are related to princesses and queens and vibing, which I love that. They do have They Don't Know About Us by One Direction, a banger. The dedication in this book is no longer to Anna's mum, which is quite sad because I was hoping she would just have like a follow-up, which would be like, yeah, mum, I told you to put the books down, please stop. But the dedication in this book is to all the girls who said, F Prince Charming, give me a scarred night. I personally am going to give this book a 2.9 out of 5. I disagree with the Goodreads lot, because although the writing is better in this book in terms of like the general quality, it's still very easy to read, which is just like a token of this type of book. I do think that the plot was less ridiculous and therefore less fun in this book. It is just a smart book. I think the other one at least tried to not be a smart book. This is just a smart book, which is fine, okay? It's fine. It is what it is, and it's good at what it is. The smut in this is very good. I personally found the first one more enjoyable purely because of how unhinged it was. I can't explain why, but I personally just feel like Rhys Larson is for the Facebook mums, and I can't really explain more than that. Congratulations, bestie, you've made it to book 3. Twisted Hate. This book has 417,000 ratings and 36,000 reviews. You will notice another drop-off from book 2 to book 3, not as severe as from book 1 to book 2, because by this point you're in for a penny, in for a pound. The girls are here. It has an overall Goodreads score of 4.01, which again, quite high in my opinion. The girls love this series, okay? This book follows BFF to famous photographer Ava Chen, Jules Ambrose. Now, Jules Ambrose is our resident redhead. She's a fiery, feisty girl. She's the hot-headed, bad girly of the group, okay? And her love interest for this book is none other than man who answers the phone whilst having intercourse, Josh Chen. Woo! I'm gonna be honest, I was very excited for Jules's book, mainly because we get glimpses of her in the other books. I believe it's in Ava's book. she goes on a night out with the girls and someone gropes her, which absolutely not. And Jules, quite rightly, punches the man in the face. I do believe that on account of that, the girlies all end up arrested, which is quite funny when you remember that BVA is a princess and she's just like spending a night in jail. She's just in the slammer. But lucky for the girls, Jules is a lawyer, okay? So she can get them out of a little sticky situation should she need. Unfortunately for us, and for Jules, I suppose, she's not just allowed to be cool, she also has to be deeply traumatized. So we do have a horrifying backstory for this poor woman. She has a predatory stepdad and an abusive ex, which both things become relevant in this book. Of course, the most important thing you need to know about Jules is she is a Leo. Guess who's also a Leo? Josh Chen, who is actually not tortured. I mean, other than the fact that his dad is currently in prison for trying to murder his sister. Josh is like, well, he didn't try and murder me. So he does actually go and visit American businessman and potential mafia member Michael Chen in prison, which is interesting because if my dad tried to murder me and then my brother was like, yeah, but I still am going to go see him in prison because what if he's lonely? I'd be having a few words. Anyway, he's actually fun and not traumatized at all in comparison to our previous guys, who's like the scarred knight who's got damage because he's an ex-Navy SEAL. And whatever this man is, the devil, God, I don't know. The description we get of Josh comes from Jules's POV, and she calls him gorgeous, charming, cocky, and doctor. That's right, this Ken's job is doctor. Notable classics in this book's playlist include Daddy Issues by The Neighborhood, which, when placed in the context that Jules has an insanely predatory stepfather who quite literally is attracted to her when she's a child. She's wrong for that. Anna's wrong for that. We're back to our insane roots in this one, by the way. We've learned that this one was a little bit too smutty, less plotty, so we went back to whatever was going on in book one. But this book I do feel like is better written than the other books. We are improving, I think. Either that, or I am so deep in twisted territory that I am no longer surprised. In fact, I am indoctrinated. This is all I want to read by this point. I read this in a single day. Now, if you cast your mind back to book one, we are told that Jules and Josh have beef, which is part of the reason why he asks Alex to watch over famous photographer Ava Chen, because Jules sometimes gets Ava into trouble because she's that girl, which is kind of fair because like she did, but Jules is fighting the good fight at the end of the day, okay? Someone has to punch people who grope people. And it's not going to be me. Anyway, their animosity explodes into an unforgettable night. And obviously, Josh Chen then can't stop thinking about her. So their solution to that is obviously to become enemies with benefits. That's right, the trope for this book is enemies to lovers. No jealousy, no strings, and no falling in love. Spoiler, all of the above will happen. They are now connected. Look at that. Something that is worth noting is that throughout this book, they routinely refer to each other as nemesis. As in, he is my nemesis. Babe, you are 25 years old. However, nemesis aside, their banter in this book is carrying. It's some of Anna's best writing. For example, when Jules plans Ava's birthday party, she debates not inviting Josh Chen because he is her nemesis. Then we get the incredible comparison of Josh to E. coli. I think the comparison is that Ava is chicken and there's always a chance of E. coli. As in, there's always a chance Josh might appear if Ava's not cooked enough. Other classic zingers include Still Hate Me? Always. This book is so unserious. We do get a bit more world building in this book, which I appreciate. For example, Josh does actually go to his job and he interacts with other people at the hospital, which I do appreciate because in book one, when this man went to work, he was just off screen. It was like when you send your sim to work, they just go off screen for a bit, time fast forwards, and then they come back. In the few times that he actually went, by the way, when he wasn't stalking 22-year-old Ava Chen. Jules also is a lawyer, so she does some things lawyery. Some things we have to talk about with this book. BVA and Reese are pretty much off screen for most of the book because they're too busy running the made-up country that she's soon to be queen of. So we get FaceTime calls with her occasionally, but she's not in it that much. Alex and Ava feature pretty consistently. Josh's relationship with Alex is a little bit rockier in this book because of the revelations in book 1, where we find out that Alex was just trying to use Josh to get to his father, American business owner, potential mafia member, and attempted murderer Michael Chen. But they're working on it. They're healing, which we love. We love male friendships. The book starts with Jules and Stella looking for a new flat, okay? Because they're moving in together because I think Ava's moving in with Alex, and so they're not roommates anymore, because they were roommates. I'm pretty sure Ava and Jules were roommates in book 1. I forgot to mention that. I don't think it's that relevant. I don't even know if it's true. I might be lying. Jules and BFF Stella welcome in Stella, by the way. She's been very quiet up until this point. She doesn't really have much to do. She's an introvert, okay? So she's just there a lot of the time. Now, when they're looking for somewhere to live, Alex mentions that he knows someone who might be able to get them a flat. And the person that Alex knows is none other than Christian Harper, who is the big boss of Harper's Security, which is a security company which we find out Reese Larson used to work for before he left the employment of this man to become the side piece to a princess. I would do the same. So Alex sets Jules and Stella up with a meeting with Christian Harper in a big fancy apartment building. It is worth noting that I do not think we are told at this point how Alex knows Christian Harper, but they know each other and he knows Reese because Reese used to work for him, and Josh doesn't know any of them. So poor Joshy boy is feeling very out of the loop here. We do find out how these two know each other in book 4, if it's not explained in book 3. I just can't remember, so I'll go over that in the next one. So Jules and Stella go to view an apartment in a building that Christian Harper owns, which is protected by Harper Security, his security company. They get there and realize that the building is way too fancy for them and the apartment is way too expensive, because at the end of the day, I think she's just become a lawyer and Stella is an influencer, but we get into that later. Anyway, they can't afford it. And in a weird turn of events that makes no sense for a billionaire CEO to say, he asks them what they can afford to pay, which I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna say it, that is the most unrealistic thing that happens in this book. The idea that a billionaire would care about whether 2 recently graduated women could afford to live in his building. He's a capitalist babe. He doesn't care about affordability. Anyway, for some reason, which we don't really know, Christian Harper agrees to let the 2 women live in his building for cheap. So now Jules and Stella are officially roommates. Okay. Now, I am going to skip over a lot of this plot because most of it is just like banter. It all gets hot and steamy and you can tell they start falling in love with each other. Blah, blah, blah. The smut in this book is smutting. I do feel like Twisted Love was the original, but it was also the most tame. The writing of smut in this book is actually feral. There is filth in this book. It is not just smut anymore. It has progressed to a new level of smut, which is filth. Let me just read out some of these for you. Beg me to make you all over like you so desperately. You love my wrecking that, don't you? Let another man touch you, Jules, and you'll find out how easily I can take a man's life as I can save one. So you took the Hippocratic Oath. Rule 1, do no harm. I went from wanting to kill you to wanting to kill for you. Sir, you are absolutely losing your medical license. As the book progresses, Josh starts giving Jules the nickname Red, which is because she's a redhead with a red hot temper. Nickname recap. We have Sunshine, Princess, and Red. 10 times out of 10, I'm taking Red. I'm sorry, that's hot. Sue me. Okay, so the actual plot beyond the enemies to lovers thing that we get into in this book, we find out through flashbacks that Jules's mother was a very pretty woman, and as she got older, she became more and more insecure about how she looked. But she used her wily womanly ways to seduce a wealthy man, and this wealthy man married her. So Jules and her mother went from being quite poor to having money because of this rich man. Turns out, however, that rich man was an absolute wrong'un, and Jules's stepfather starts flirting with Jules. Obviously, Jules is like a young woman. I don't even think she's an adult when this starts happening. I think she's like 16, 17. So this man is a full predator. He starts flirting with Jules and starts making sexual advances towards Jules, which obviously is going to give you damage as a child if your stepfather, the man who is supposed to be a father figure to you, starts trying to sleep with you. And the bit that gets even more messed up is instead of Jules's mum being like, oh, so my husband's actually a predator, she blames Jules for the whole incident, and she thinks that Jules is trying to seduce her husband and just goes nuts at Jules and ends up with Jules leaving. Jules then gets into an abusive relationship with her ex. Her ex is not a very nice guy, but her ex happens to have some explicit photos of her from when they were together. And if that's not messed up enough, I do believe she was 17 when those images were taken. So anyway, ex-boyfriend starts getting back in contact with Jules, and she's like, huh? And he begins to blackmail Jules with the images that he has of her from when they were together years ago. Obviously, Jules is like, well, what do you want? Like, this is messed up. Please delete the pictures. And he says that what he wants her to do is steal a painting for him. Yes, that is correct. This book is becoming an art heist. Now, you may be thinking, well, what painting? Is it from a museum? Is it from a gallery? No, the picture in question is actually hanging in none other than Dr. Josh Chen's house. Prior to the introduction of the art heist plotline, Jules goes over to Josh's house a few times when they're hooking up, and she mentions how ugly this painting is. She hates it. And then when her ex/blackmailer sends her the picture of the painting she has to steal, she recognizes that it's the one that's hanging in Josh's house. It is mentioned, however, that Josh loves this painting and it is one of his prized possessions. So that makes the next part really funny. Obviously, Jules now has two options. Option A, Jules tells her love interest, Josh Chen, that she is being blackmailed by her abusive ex-boyfriend to steal a painting that he loves and cherishes. And they can decide to either give him the painting together or go to the police, because all of these things are crimes. Or option B, Jules does not tell Josh Chen any of this, doesn't tell the police either, and then proceeds to steal Josh's most prized possession and just hope he won't notice. I'll give you a moment to think, but yeah, no, she did option B. So Jules then hatches a plan to steal the painting from Josh by staging a break-in in his house, and she steals a few other things, but the most important thing that she takes is obviously the painting. Now, Josh doesn't know that this painting is like worth a lot of money, by the way. He just assumes it's like a nice picture that he likes. He's not that mad that it's missing because he doesn't know it's worth a lot of money. He's just sad because it was something he loved. So super not so nice of Jules to stage a break-in and violate this man's personal feelings of safety and security instead of just communicating. In her head, she's worried that if he finds out about her seedy past and the fact that she's all this drama with this man who's blackmailing her, you know, he won't like her anymore because she's damaged goods. I kind of understand, but that is so sad because it's not her fault that this man is a horrible man. She's just been let down by a lot of people, and that has put her in some awful situations, but it doesn't make her a bad person. So, Jules has stolen the painting. She's being eaten alive by guilt, and she decides, actually, I don't want to give this painting to this man because he's never going to delete these images of me, and this is just going to go on and on and on, and he's going to hold it over my head forever. So she's in a little bit of a rut, right? Because she doesn't want to tell the police, because even in the Ana Huang universe, nobody trusts police. So what does she do? Who is the person that Jules Ambrose contacts to help her with her little situation involving an art heist and an abusive ex who's blackmailing her with an indecent video? If you guess COO of a real estate development company and Eastern European mafia member Alex Volkov, you would be correct. So she gets in touch with this man who I firmly believe at this point is the devil. Alex says, I know a guy, we'll get this sorted. The guy that he knows is none other than CEO of Harper Security, Christian Harper. Now, Christian agrees to help because him and Alex are tight, which we'll explain more in the next book, but also because Jules Ambrose, if you recall, is Stella Alonso's roommate. And as you can see, these two are opposite each other, so this does become relevant in book 4. These three then come up with a plan. Christian Harper, because he's a security company owner, gives Jules a device that if you put it near someone's phone, deletes all the pictures and videos off that person's phone and all the devices in the room, including like a laptop or something. I don't know. It's is tech magic. So Jules has to just get that little device near her ex's phone and his laptop, and all the videos will be deleted. Meanwhile, Alex has done some background digging on her blackmailer to find dirt on him that Jules can then use to counter blackmail him and make him leave her alone. The hope is that these two components together will mean that the blackmailer will leave Jules alone forever, she won't have to hand over the painting, she can return the painting to love interest Josh Chen and explain everything, and then they can live happily ever after. Nice and easy plan. Now, would you believe it if I told you that the part of this plan that actually fails is not the part where the technological device has to magically delete images on someone else's phone. It's not the part where Alex finds dirt big enough on her abusive ex that he is scared and leaves her alone. No, the part of the plan that actually fails is the part where Jules tells Josh everything and returns the painting, and they live happily ever after. You know why? Because Josh decides to become the worst person in the entire twisted cinematic universe, which is really saying something when you consider that this man murdered half of his own family and then kidnapped famous photographer Ava Chen and a literal princess. This man tried to murder his own child and ended up getting his wife suicided. And this man is literally the devil. Now, chapter 46, which is the chapter where Jules confesses to Josh everything that happened, is probably the most jarring, unsettling chapter that I read throughout the entirety of the series. And that's because this chapter felt like something that could actually exist in the real world. Now, whilst a lot of the topics that do get covered in the Twisted series have happened and do happen to people, they are not common occurrences. They're not things that are probably going to be relatable to your average reader of a silly, goofy smut book. Chapter 46, in terms of what Josh actually does, felt like something a real man would do, and that personally I did not enjoy, which probably is why it's some of Anna's best writing in terms of it made me feel physically uncomfortable. I wasn't prepared for this level of just jarring psychological meanness in a silly, goofy smart book. So because Jules isn't actually a bad person, she ends up confessing all of this to Josh and returns all the things that she stole from him, including the painting. This chapter is from Josh's POV, so we get his internal monologue for this rather than Jules's, because we get Jules's for the build-up of guilt and then Josh's for the reveal. I stole the items. Jules's confession hit me like a bullet in the chest. I'm so sorry, I didn't want to do it. He was blackmailing me and I didn't know what else to do except go along with it, and Her rambled explanation faded as the roar grew louder. Her words ran together into a murky stream that painted the world in ugly greys and vicious reds. I listened, numb, as Jules explained everything more clearly this time. When she finished, the ensuing silence was loud enough to deafen me. I'm sorry, Jules swallowed. I should have told you all this earlier, but I didn't want to ruin what we had when we were just starting to get along. I wasn't sure how you'd react, and I thought, you thought? That if I told you about my past, it would confirm every horrible thing you'd ever thought about me. Her voice grew smaller with each word, like she was realizing how stupid they were. My rage pulsed harder. I see, I repeated, the cold in my chest intensified. I forgive you, she faltered, her face twisting with confusion at the contrast between my words and my chilly tone. You do? Yes, I smiled. The movement felt strange, like I was contorting my mouth into a position it was no longer capable of. Come here, Red. The nickname tasted bitter on my tongue. After a moment's hesitation, she stepped towards me. Even with ashen skin and dark circles shadowing her eyes, she was the most beautiful, treacherous thing I'd ever seen. The chapter then devolves into them having sex, where from Josh's point of view, it is super mechanical and angry. Like, you can tell he's furious at her, and the whole point of having sex is almost to punish her. He does check that it's consensual, like he asks her if she wants it and she says yes, and Josh decides he's so angry at her he doesn't even want to look at her, so he makes her face away from him, and then right as she's about to he says, remember when I said I forgive you? I lied. And she has her and starts crying. I disentangled myself from her and stood. She slumped forward on the ground, her dress bunched around her waist, her shoulders shaking with soft cries. How does it feel to be lied to, Jules? The raw, angry words sounded like they came from someone else. Someone crueler than I ever thought I could be. Doesn't feel good, does it? Michael, Alex, Jules. 3 of the people I trusted most all stabbed me in the back. It seems only fitting for us to end things with a goodbye. A cruel smile slashed across my mouth. At least you got an orgasm out of it, so don't say I never gave you anything. I'll miss that of yours though. No one takes my better than you do. It's your best quality. I truly think that this is like an irredeemable thing that Josh does, because not only is it really messed up to do that, but also Jules has been made to believe her whole life, and it's mentioned a lot throughout the book, that her only value is through what she can provide to men through her body. It is a fear of hers. It's an insecurity, and Josh knows that. So for him to do this is like so messed up. Now, obviously, they break up. Jules is very upset. Josh is very upset. And I also am very upset, mind, because I feel robbed. Like, I don't think Josh needed to behave this way. He was supposed to be our fun boy. I understand that the justification for this behavior is that he's been lied to and messed around by all the people that he cares about in his life, including former BFF COO of a real estate development company, Eastern European mafia member and potentially the devil, Alex Volkov, and American businessman, potential mafia member and attempted murderer, Michael Chen. So I understand he has his daddy issues. Maybe that's who the song was about. Personally, I just feel like being traumatized is not an excuse to traumatize others. Even if it is an explanation as to why you are traumatizing others, it doesn't justify it. It doesn't make it redeemable. It's not like a get out of jail free card. What you did was still wrong, babe. You've got to, pay the piper. At this point, when they are broken up, Jules' ex makes a reappearance because it comes out that the reason he needed the painting was because he was in trouble with a gang who were gonna kill him if he doesn't give them the painting, right? And so obviously his life is on the line. So Jules is leaving work and her ex, Max, appears in a stairwell. He is feral. So Jules is obviously like, get out of town, buddy boy. You have no power over me. She's doing her thing. Max doesn't take that too well, and then proceeds to push Jules down 2 flights of concrete stairs. This is all happening in the last 100 pages of this book. Now, if you'll remember, Josh Chen is famously a doctor. So of course, when Jules comes to the hospital to get treated for her head injury, out of all the doctors in the city, who is the one that is assigned to treat Jules Ambrose? Josh Chen. Picks up the kind of clipboard that says who his patient is, and he's like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. And he opens it up and he sees her and she's got this cut on her head. And he goes, Jules, hurt. Time slowed into one endless, painful beat. It was so quiet I could count each individual thud of my pulse. 1, 2, 3. You'd think a week would be long enough to blunt the serrated edges of my pain, but you'd be wrong. They raked against my insides, making me bleed all over again. But they were nothing compared to the worry raging in my gut. How the hell did Jules get that cut? What if it was infected? What if she... No, in this room we weren't exes. She was a patient and I was her doctor. This wasn't the time to wallow in our personal history or freak out over one small cut, no matter how much the sight of her blood made my heart twist. The sweat intensified at the worst case scenarios for all possible internal injuries flashed through my mind. Stop. She's your patient. That's it. Long story short, Josh treats Jules' head injury. Some banter back and forth happens after that. Some time passes. They realize they were meant to be together all along. They kiss and make up, which I have moral objections to be honest. Then Josh decides to sell the painting that he owns, the really expensive one, to a private collector who really wanted it. And that way he doesn't have to worry about the gang who really want that painting anymore, which is great news because it puts him out of trouble from unhinged Max trying to steal it again. So everyone's happy, but I have just realized I completely forgot to mention during this book, Bridget and Reese get married and they have a big royal wedding, which is actually quite a fun little chapter, and Ava and Alex get engaged. At the end of this book, they are all happy-go-lucky. Josh then asks Jules if getting married is something that she wants to do in the future, and she's like, actually, I'm kind of just focusing on my career right now. Josh kind of says the same thing, and we're supposed to be like, yay, they're perfect for each other because they're both career-driven. But, like, I'm sorry, but, like, I can't get over what he did. Like, that, I'm not sure I forgive him. Interesting plot points to mention that I did kind of forget / gloss over. Jules' original father is dead. And I mention this as an interesting point because that brings the total number of parents that these 6 people have to 4. Which, I'm gonna be honest, unless these lot met at an orphan convention, it seems incredibly statistically unlikely that they have so few alive parents whilst they're all in their 20s. I have updated our little board here of connections to include Jules Ambrose's relationship with her creepy ex Max and her going to Alex Volkov and Christian Harper for help with creepy ex-boyfriend Max. In terms of review, I would say I do think Twisted Hate is some of Anna's best writing. The smut in this is absolutely diabolical, and I did feel like I needed to like hit a church and do a cleanse or something. Do not read this book in public. Don't read any of these books in public, actually. One, because if you're not in the Commonwealth, you've got those god-awful model covers, but also because you will be red in the face. You will feel dirty. Chapter 46 was also particularly well written in that it gave me like a visceral reaction. I felt physically uncomfortable. I don't feel that way in any of the other books. So I think that's an example of her writing potentially finding more ground in reality, which does set this more within the contemporary romance genre than perhaps the other books did. Although the art heist aspect and gang thing was a little bit out there, the idea of being blackmailed by indecent images and worrying about like consequences for your relationships and your job is unfortunately quite realistic. The dedication for this book is a little bit deeper than the other ones, to everyone who's ever felt like they weren't enough, which is very sad. I don't like that. I would like everyone to feel enough. If nobody told you today, besties, you are enough for me. And my opinion here is the only one that matters because I'm the one with the mic. Personally, I think that this is Anna's best book in the series. I think her characters had actual decent chemistry in this one. There was no really weird time skips, and I just think it was better written. So there we are. I'm giving Twisted Hate 4 out of 5. We made it to the final book of the series, Twisted Lies. The little tagline for this book, I will say it does sound like Anna just gave up, which, to be fair, same. He'll do anything to have her, including lie. Okay. The playlist for this one is interesting. No real, like, notable songs, other than the very last song, which is Said I Love You, But I Lied by Michael Bolton. That would have been really relevant for book one. It's not that relevant for this book. The lie that he gets caught in is not that. The playlist did not slap, it did not deliver as hard as the other ones did, I will be honest, which is why I think Anna gave up with this book. This book has 354,000 ratings and 32,000 reviews, which is quite a chunk off other books. But you know what? Only the strongest make it to the end. It has an overall Goodreads rating of 4.22, and I do think it's worth noting that whilst the writing is generally improving throughout the series, I think that the reason the review rating overall is going up is because less people who aren't interested in this kind of book are reading until book 4. So this book follows our final characters, roommate to Jules Ambrose, Stella Alonso, and Christian Grey. Christian Harper. Christian Harper is described as charming, deadly, and smart enough to hide it. A monster dressed in the perfectly tailored suits of a gentleman. Also, a Gemini. I really don't understand, like, what is up with the need for men in these books to just, like, kill people. Like, this man is the COO of a real estate development company. Why is he killing people? This man is a bodyguard, so arguably the only one in here who has a license to literally kill people, because, you know, he's got to protect his princess. This man, though, this man is a doctor. I genuinely think that this is why the male love interests in fantasy books are more appealing to wider audiences, because when you say, I'll kill for her, in a fantasy book where there's like elves and magic, I'm like, yeah, sure, I could believe it, because the rules don't apply there, right? When you are the COO of a real estate development company who makes financial models when they're 17, I am a bit like, why are you murdering people? It just gives me the ick. If a man came to me in real life and was like, I want to make a few things clear. Touch another man, he dies. Let another man touch you, he dies. Say I can't touch you, and I will fucking die. And that is an actual quote from this book. I'm not willing to accept that that is a thing a man is allowed to say. So the dedication in this book is to everyone whose favourite colour is morally grey. Now this is a shout out to the BOOKTOK girlies who read this genre of book, because there's a big love of characters who are morally grey, which is often men who say things like, I will kill for her. But it's like, it's in that moral grey area where like murder's okay because the guy he murdered was a bad guy. However, in this book and in most of these books, I would not say that the lead male love interests are morally grey. I would say that they are objectively bad people. Not to mention, two of them are literally billionaires, which, did we forget, eat the rich? And you're setting it in a contemporary world where an IG influencer exists as a job. I mean, the laws are all the same, which means none of these people are morally grey. They're actually criminals. Anyway, in this book, we meet Stella Alonso, who is a shy, introverted girly. Stella is also a Libra, just like me. This book is a slow burn between dark and damaged Christian and pure soul Stella. We find out that he lets Stella and Jules live in the apartment for cheaper because one day, and this is not a joke, this is the actual plot of the book, one day he was sat having coffee outside and a thief stole a woman's bag. That woman happened to be Stella Alonso. So Stella Alonso runs after the criminal and grabs her bag back, and the police come, and instead of like pressing charges against the dude, she says, why did you steal my bag? And he's like, because I needed money for food. And she gives him money for food, which Christian at the time is like, lol, what a dumb idiot, he's gonna go and buy drugs or whatever. Which, by the way, is such a rich person mindset. Like, that's such a thing a billionaire would say. He's sat there categorizing the deserving and undeserving poor like he's the 1601 poor law. Like, it's outrageous, babe. From that day on, ever since he saw her do that, he has been obsessed with this woman. I kid you not, he used all his tech knowledge to create a research folder on Stella. So he has like a documents folder on this random woman, right? Because he was so curious by her goodness. So we then find out how Christian and Alex know each other. And they know each other because they both belong to a billionaire's boys club. I'm not joking. They play chess together like every week. And they're like intellectually matched because they're financially matched, I guess. So they're just two big alpha dogs in a big rich people house. I don't know. Josh, throughout this book, gets quite jealous of their friendship, which is quite funny to me, because I feel like he deserves that. I didn't mention this with the last book, but it's worth noting that the only reason that this man helps out anyone in this entire series is because they are important to Ava, which is quite sweet. So, for example, when Jules and Stella need an apartment in Twisted Hate, Ava feels bad that she's moving out to move in with Alex, which is why they now need a new place because they're being evicted, basically. When Christian finds out that the girlies that Alex is trying to get an apartment are Jules and Stella, aka the girl he has a research folder on, he's like, well, this could be a good opportunity to have her live in my building and see if she's actually as good of a person as she pretended to be that day. So he lets them live in his apartment building for much cheapness, which is great. The girlies are loving it. I don't know, at this point it truly feels like Anna gave up. So in potentially one of the most realistic plot points in this entire series, influencer Stella gets a call from her manager that says, hey babe, we know you're really trying to get 1 million followers on Instagram, but your growth is kind of stagnating. Same babe, I feel that. Please follow me on Instagram. An influencer that Stella is in the same sphere as and kind of loosely competes against has just hit 1 million followers, and her manager says it's because she has gotten a boyfriend. And this boyfriend has helped her drive up her engagement rate, which means she's getting more comments and likes and follows. So her manager suggests that she gets a boyfriend purely for the content. And I'm not gonna lie, he is so real for that. So Stella asks landlord and potential murderer Christian Harper if he'll be her fake boyfriend for some IG posts. And he's like, okay, but you have to be my date to this big benefit thing that I'm doing. And so she doesn't ever post his face. She just posts photos of like his back or his hand on her leg in a nice dress. And it does help. Her engagement goes crazy. He kind of gets off on it because he's like, oh, it's me on Stella's feed. Ooh, I love Stella. Stella's so pretty and innocent. And there's a lot of play in this book on Stella's innocence juxtaposed with his dark and broodiness, right? Again, very confused because this man is just supposed to be the big boss of a security company. So I'm not sure why he's so bad and broody. Like, I'm confused. These books do love to make the female main character very dependent on the men. So In this book, obviously, Stella has a stalker, which she can't deal with on her own, and that's where security expert Harper comes into play. Someone breaks into her apartment, and he's like, how the fuck did this happen? Because I'm supposed to be watching the security because I own the security company. And so he's trying to figure that out. And this is all very relevant because Jules then moves out to move in with Josh. So she's like, okay, well, I can't afford the rent on my own. And then the stalker thing happens. So Christian just says, you move into my apartment. I have a spare room. And she's like, well, I can't pay for that. And he's like, well, I need you to water my plants. So she basically gets free rent in exchange for watering some plants. How does it feel to live my dream? So the stalker thing keeps going. There's a thing with a unicorn as well, which I just don't want to get into. They keep up their fake relationship. It's like slow burny, so there's definitely feelings there. Stella then gets invited on an influencer brand trip, like a shoot for this brand to like some hot island somewhere, and Christian comes with her. I can't remember the reason why he comes with her, whether it's for content, because fake boyfriend, or whether it's because she's worried about her stalker who's been sending her a bunch of like creepy letters throughout this whole thing. And she's doing like a bikini shoot on the beach. He buys her a very expensive necklace, like very expensive, which, I mean, good for her. And then the two proceed to make sweet, sweet love on the beach with her wearing only that necklace. When is it my turn to be happy? His nickname for her is Butterfly, and the justification for that is beautiful, elusive, hard to catch. Don't love that. Stella confesses her love for Christian, and he doesn't say it back, because obviously he's our damaged, broody boy. They get back from the holiday. Christian goes to work, and Stella's like, you know what? I am still living rent-free in this man's apartment, even though we now share a room. I am going to water the plants, because I don't want him to think that I am slipping. And so Stella starts watering the plants, and then while she's at it, she's like, you know what? I should dust this man's house because it is dusty, crusty, musty. And then while she's dusting, she finds a secret drawer in his desk which has a folder in, and she opens the folder, and guess what's in the folder? Her. Now, if you remember, Stella famously has a stalker. Now, if you're thinking what I was thinking, which is that Christian is actually her stalker and has been all along, which actually would have been the biggest plot twist. That would have been such a good plot twist, Anna. That would have been so good. So no, whilst he did absolutely violate her privacy, he didn't send her creepy letters. Whilst he did stalk her, he is not the stalker. Which, the fact that that's a sentence I have to say in a romance novel is insane. So Stella finds this, she's obviously distraught, because even though she's realised, right, he's not the stalker, he has still stalked her. And that's a boundary, as it would be for most people. So she leaves, she packs up her stuff, she moves out. Christian comes home from work, and he's like, I'm gonna tell Stella that I'm in love with her, I've figured it out. Good for him. He comes home, she's not there. Where's Stella gone? And we get this incredible scene where he's like, Stella? And he's devastated because he can't find her. And we find out that Stella has fled to famous photographer Ava Chen's house, where she lives with her fiancé, COO of a real estate development company, Eastern European mafia boss, and potentially the devil, Alex Volkov. The scene that follows is where Christian goes to their house to try and retrieve Stella. And it is iconic. This is the scene that the girlies on TikTok were making videos about, okay? This is the scene. The door finally swung open. Instead of Alex's cold green eyes, I found myself staring at 5 feet 5 inches of thinly veiled suspicion. Oh, it's you. A frown marred Ava's normally friendly face when she saw me. You're interrupting our lunch. I want to talk to her. I don't know who you're talking about. My back teeth clenched. Stella. Ava's hand tightened around the doorknob. She stood squarely in the entrance, barring me from entering. She's not here. That's bullshit. I know she's here. I ditched the softer approach. Step aside, Ava, or I'll... Careful how you finish that sentence, Harper. Alex appeared beside his fiancée, his eyes like chips of jade-colored ice as they roved over my disheveled appearance. I only cared about one thing, and that was seeing Stella. The amount of TikTok videos I have seen containing just that one section of dialogue is incredible. The girls went feral for this. And to be honest, I can't blame them. Alex Volkov is way cooler in every other one of these books than his own. And that is something I did quite like about the Twisted series, is that even though each book follows a new character in the friend group, because they are all in a friend group, each person still makes little appearances here and there throughout the book. I'm going to draw some connections on this map because obviously now the girlies are connected. Anyway, Stella agrees to see him. They have a chat. Christian explains himself, and his general explanation is she was a stranger. He didn't really know anything about her. And the minute he actually got to know her in real life, he stopped collecting data on her. I think the argument here that Anna's gone for, the justification is, well, she shares her life online anyway, so technically he doesn't know any more about her than like her Instagram followers do. But like, I don't think that's true because this man had like a file on her. Most people I follow on Instagram, I don't even remember I follow them. I think Anna put that in there just so that we could differentiate him and his stalking to the actual stalker's stalking. I'm not buying it. I'm gonna be honest. I still feel like it's creepy, and so does Stella. And she basically says, you knew everything about me when we first met, and I knew nothing about you, and you didn't disclose that you knew everything about me, and you kind of pretended that you didn't, and then like you lied about it. But it's like not really a lie because he just never said, so it's like a lie by omission, and that is obviously the twisted lie that Christian gets caught in. Goodbye, Christian Harper. So some time goes by and Stella's like heartbroken over the whole Christian thing, but of course we are entering the final 100 pages of this book. Now, you've been with me through this whole journey, so what does that mean, audience? What does that mean? I will give you 5 seconds to take a guess. Yes, that does mean there is a kidnapping murder plot about to happen. Indeed. We find out that the reason Stella Stalker wasn't present for like the first 3 books is because he took a break from being her stalker to work on himself so that he could get some money so that she would want him, basically. He like started going to the gym or something. Self-betterment is not a bad path to go on, but it's not really self-betterment if you're doing it purely because you're trying to get with an IG influencer who doesn't know you exist. That's more like delusion. But then Stella started posting about her fake boyfriend Christian Harper, and the stalker was like, well, she's supposed to be waiting for me. How dare she get a boyfriend? Ironically, he decides to drug and kidnap her after Christian and her have already broken up. So it was kind of like unnecessary. I'm not saying that she would ever want to date her stalker, but what I'm saying is that like if he was just not insane, he might have stood a chance. So Stella's stalker drugs and kidnaps Stella. Even more hilarious is not that being kidnapped by your stalker is hilarious. During the scene where Stella wakes up and is confronted by her stalker, and her stalker's telling her all this and saying how he's gonna take her away to live in the countryside with him so they can live happily ever after without Christian. At no point does Stella say like, oh yeah, by the way, me and Christian broke up. At no point does she lie. At no point does she say, yeah, by the way, it was a fake relationship. The stalker has a gun. I feel like this is important to mention. And Stella, for some reason, and this could never be me, says, no, I actually love Christian Harper and I'm gonna stay here with Christian Harper. I will never love you, Mr. Stalker. Did I mention that the stalker has a gun? Don't get me wrong. I love that she's in her honesty era, but quite honestly could never be me. If a man who was delusional enough to drug and kidnap me held a gun to my head and said, you're coming to live with me and we're going to be happy together in the countryside, I simply would be like, yes, sir, you are the love of my life. I love the countryside. And I would bide my time until my ex, who is frequently described as deadly and is a security expert and fiance to my best friend and famous photographer Ava Chen, Alex Volkov, aka the devil, I would wait for them to come and find me because you know they will. Okay, you know they will. So yeah, Stella decides to be super honest with the delusional stalker man who's holding a gun to her head, who's just literally drugged and kidnapped her. And surprisingly, he does not take it well. And he is going to shoot Stella in the head. But thankfully for us, just as he's about to pull the trigger, Who bashes down the door? It's Christian Harper with his team of elite ex-Navy SEAL security guards. Woohoo! Stella's saved, and they have a cute little moment where he's like, nothing's ever gonna hurt you again, butterfly, don't worry. And they kiss, and I guess that's the end. Except it's not. Now, what actually happens is, even though they called the police when they figured out where Stella was, the stalker in question who drugged, kidnapped, and attempted to murder IG influencer Stella Alonso does not get arrested and goes into police custody. No. He gets kidnapped by Christian Harper and held in a warehouse, tied up like he's in that Da Vinci painting. Okay? Spread eagle. I hope you enjoyed that imagery. Christian and another man then proceed to torture her stalker with a different dozen blades, brass knuckles, screwdrivers, whips, nails, hooks. The list goes on and on. I could have spent the entire day working on Julian. 24 hours was nothing compared to the months of hell he'd put Stella through. Perhaps I would have, had I not returned to the table to swap my dull, overworked knife for a fresh one and saw the text message waiting for me. I'd left my phone next to the blades. The text on screen was comically out of place. A jarring reminder that life existed outside of these walls. Stella, come home to me. My breathing slowed. I was drenched in sweat and splattered with blood. My usual restraint had snapped beneath the weight of Stella's hurt, but her words tethered me back to earth. An image of Stella looking at me with those soft, knowing green eyes that morning replaced the warehouse. Don't give him any pieces of your soul. I'd thought I didn't have any left, but I was wrong. There was one remaining piece, and it belonged to her. Crimson gradually retreated from my vision. I dropped the knife and stared at the broken down, barely conscious man hanging on the wall. The urge to make him suffer longer was still there, coiled like a vicious snake in my gut. But the desire to return to Stella was stronger. You got lucky, I said. I picked up my gun. 3 strategically placed shots later, Stella's stalker was nothing more than a lifeless, bloodied heap of flesh. May I remind you that this man is the CEO of a security company, and yet he has a torture warehouse? And if you were wondering if there were any consequences for this at any point in the remaining 30 pages of this book, there are not. So we get to the end of the book and we get a nice little round off to the series from Christian's POV, where he kind of sums up where everyone else is at the end of this book. They are at Reese and Bridget's getaway house in Costa Rica, which I don't actually think I mentioned in their book, but their first steamy scene is during her last getaway in Costa Rica, before she has to marry a duke and be like a royal for real. They have like a midsummer blowout in Costa Rica, and then once they're like married and their book is over, Reese buys that house for her as like a retreat holiday home. How a security guard pays for an entire house in Costa Rica, I don't know, but there we are. Anyway, the whole gang, everyone on this board who has a picture, because Michael Chen is still in prison, is at Reese and Bridget's Costa Rica house. We find out that Alex and Ava, obviously they're married now. They have 2 kids, twins, a boy and a girl. Alex refers to the baby girl as Little Sunshine, which is quite sweet, to be honest with you. We find out that Bridget and Reese have a daughter as well. Jules and Josh finally got engaged. Love that for them. It is described that Jules gets a fat diamond ring, as expected from a doctor-lawyer duo. We love that for them. Their dual income must be crazy. And then we find out that Christian and Stella also got married. And then we get like this little cute scene with them in the kitchen where Stella says that she's not drinking alcohol after Christian offers it to her. Spoiler, she's pregnant. Okay, that's it. That's Twisted Lies done. That's the entirety of the Twisted series done. I do feel like I've lost so many brain cells, but I have gained so much entertainment. Right, I'm going to update this board with any missing links, and then we're going to do a little debrief about how I felt about the series. So this is Stella's stalker, Julian. Obviously now Julian is dead. I think we can also assume that Max is dead. I wasn't lying when I told you it gets weirdly incestuous. I personally thought that this book was boring. It was very predictable. The only thing that I really wanted to happen was Christian to turn out to be the stalker, which I thought would be really funny, and that didn't happen. I'm gonna give this book a 2 out of 5. It's fine. It's fine. It is what you think it's gonna be. I'm just gonna be honest, I'm so sick of it. By book 4, I've had enough. I was gonna do a little recap of all the plots, but basically all you need to know is that most people that these individuals interact with die. Dead, 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 prison, dead, potentially dead, and then definitely dead. This is the full plot of the Twisted Cinematic Universe. I hope you enjoyed that. These books are an incredibly easy read, so much so that, as I mentioned, I did not think they would contain the level of explicit content that they did, given the standard of writing. I now know that that writing is pretty much written that way deliberately because the plot is not really what you're there for. They're supposed to be easy to read pieces of fiction, which is fine. There are typos in the books, which is incredible when you consider how many books have been sold. Like, you would think that someone would have fixed it at that point, but for self-published pieces of work, they are very impressive. Yes, the plots are utterly unhinged. They are formulaic to a T, but the girls aren't going into this looking for a piece of fiction that's going to change their lives. They are going into it for a short, sweet, good time and some smut. That is it. And once you take away any preconceived notion that these books are going to change your life, or they're going to be incredible or well written, they're actually very enjoyable. I approach these books the same way that you might approach reality TV. They are thoroughly entertaining because they are mostly rubbish. I did really enjoy these books. I finished all of them, I think, in 3 days. These books are a good time as long as you turn off your brain. And that's all they're there for. Now, these books have received quite a lot of criticism as of late for essentially perpetuating stereotypes that women are weak, need men to save them, for idolizing toxic behaviors and red flags in relationships and in men, and toxic masculinity. These books are adult books, right? And whilst I agree that in children's literature particularly, we have to be careful about how we present relationships as healthy and the behaviors that are appropriate in relationships, these books are for adults. And whilst you could say, well, you know, young teens are gonna read them, they shouldn't be, number one. But number two, it's not the author's responsibility to police what children are reading. That is the responsibility of that person's parents. So adults are the primary audience for this book, and adults know that this is fiction. It's not something that they are going to take away and idolize and be like, this is so healthy in a relationship. It is a piece of fiction where you're supposed to suspend your reality. I mean, come on, dude, you see how many murder plots there are? It's not real. And adults know that. They are reading this in the same way that they understand that reality TV also is not real. It is a good, silly time where you get to suspend your belief and engage in almost like a fantasy. Ana Huang is not selling life advice. She is selling a fantasy. And adults can differentiate between the two things. All of these books are selling a fantasy to women who are interested in engaging in that fantasy. If you're not interested in it, get out of town. It's just like sex, right? You're not going to do things that you're not interested in. The problem I see with a lot of criticisms of these types of works is that they are trying to compare them to classic pieces of literature. I saw this TikTok of a man saying he'd just finished reading like Pride and Prejudice and he wanted to read another book, and he came across a TikTok book called Icebreaker, which is another smut book. And he was outraged and disgusted, and the video got hundreds of thousands of likes of people being like, yeah, they all read porn, it's crazy. And if that had been a silly, goofy video where this guy talked about how it caught him by surprise and he was just like, oh my god, I would have laughed, I would have liked it, I'd have been like, okay, haha, that is quite funny. Because the juxtaposition between Pride and Prejudice and Icebreaker is quite large. However, this TikTok by this man berated the people who read these books and berated the community of BOOKTOK as a whole. I have so many issues with this, partially because it's a really stupid generalization that just has no place, but also because it creates this idea that there is no space for books like this on BOOKTOK or in culture in general, which There absolutely is. Like, if you're interested in Pride and Prejudice, why would you pick up a book like Icebreaker? Just read the blurb. Look at the cover. That's clearly not going to be your cup of tea. There is a thing where people like to take content that is largely created by women for women and undermine it. They demean it, they make it a joke or something to be laughed at and shamed. That is largely happening with these books, and I don't think it's fair. A lot of the criticism that I see of these kinds of books really feels rooted in misogyny, to be honest with you, where just because this type of book is not your cup of tea, you want to undermine it and make people who do enjoy this feel silly. I don't enjoy reality TV. I understand, however, that a lot of my friends really do, and they get enjoyment out of it. They get escapism out of it. I respect the value that they get from watching that show, even if I don't get the same value from it. Also, this is not to say that you can't criticize the books. I actually really enjoy a lot of the videos that poke fun at these books, that criticize these books. I think they're very entertaining. I just think there's a line between criticizing a piece of literature and making jokes about it, and then making jokes about the people that enjoy it and joking at their expense. The narrative lens that the criticisms and the jokes take is very important, and I feel like a lot of people are missing the mark and they're just bullying people who enjoy these works, which I'm not about. Let people enjoy things. These books are not to be compared to Pride and Prejudice. They're not to be compared to philosophy books or books that possess real genuine weight and social commentary and emotion. These books are light-hearted reality TV shows. They're not a documentary on capitalism or structures of oppression, okay? They're not supposed to do that. To compare Pride and Prejudice and smart books like this is kind of insane because they're not competing. They're not trying to achieve the same thing. The way that these books specifically are placed into wider contexts of like social discussion is crazy to me. Because they're just silly little goofy smart books, okay? And whilst you could argue that yes, no literature is published in a vacuum, and all literature that is posted is a product of its socioeconomic climate, and thus culture informs culture, so if these are posted and consumed, it becomes part of the mainstream culture and determines culture, right? Like, ultimately. Which I get, but you're not keeping that energy for all of the books you read. You're targeting that on these books. Is there a conversation to be had about how the popularity of books like this is generally causing more books like this to be written? Yes, but that's just basic supply and demand. There are still writers who are going to write incredible emotional works of art that don't contain any spice. If you don't want spice, there are literally countless millions of books that you could read. This is what I would call like an emerging genre. And so therefore it is kind of becoming crazed right now. That will die down, and the people who don't want to read it won't read it, and the people who will. The way in which that these books in particular are being targeted by popular culture right now feels very much like the women are crazy. I genuinely don't think I've ever spoken about a book as much as I've spoken about Twisted Love, purely because the plots are just so unhinged in that book that I had so much fun. Overall, I am going to give this series a 2.5 stars out of 5. I love my girl Ana Huang. The smut was great, the plots less so. I'm not gonna lie, this is the first video I've posted in months, and I'm pretty nervous about posting it, especially because I've never made a video like this before. So any feedback, any comments would be massively appreciated, because I'm not gonna lie, I'm nervous. I'm sweating as I'm doing this. Thank you so much to CHEEX for sponsoring part of today's video. Remember, if book spice is not your thing, CHEEX has got you covered. Just click that link in the description down below, babe.